So we've had a question from this one from a performer. I'm a performer in Vocal Crisis, due to perform tonight. What should I do?
Well, it won't be the first time I've ever had that question.
Probably not the last time.
Quite often get ENTs ringing up trying to find if we can fit somebody in last minute and that kind of thing. It depends really. I mean, you can get people through those crisis times. Very often we have to get people through kind of whole runs of shows with just keeping the voice intact. There are things you can do, I think, that will keep the voice intact, at least at the level that it is, because without the kind of rehab and the specialist input, the voice will is very prone to deteriorate and fatigue even quicker and then get to the point where perhaps it just doesn't work at all.
Right.
So very often the kind of more emergency things people would do is give them some kind of vocal things that make the larynx open and allow the breath to go in, working a little bit on allowing the breath to go in, the breath to go out. Steam inhalation is something that kind of helps inflammation.
Right.
So doing that beforehand. If someone is more in vocal crisis, they tend to need to conserve voice. So I tend to limit long vocal warm-ups and recommend something very efficient but short in length,
right,
so that the vocal cords are getting stretched, the spaces are getting opened and stretched, but they're not being kind of really overused with lots and lots of different scales and glides. And I think that's a misconception that people think if they just warm up their voice a lot, it's bound to be better. But actually, when you've got an injury, you need to think of warming it up in a very efficient but not too long, time-consuming way.
Yeah, to not wear it out.
Exactly. You're trying to conserve to get you through. Then again, at the end of a performance, a bit of a cool down, some postures in the larynx that are helpful for cool down and stretches, and maybe make sure you hydrate well, and just rest at that point. Vocal rest at that point is important. When you're in crisis, vocal rest suddenly does become very important.
And what if the vocal crisis is so bad that you don't even know if you're, let's say from a performance standpoint, hit the back of the room? Is there anything you could do? And not necessarily projection specifically, but you're not even sure that your voice is at a level where you are capable of performing.
Again, it depends what kind of issue we're dealing with in the throat. Because if it's something like laryngitis, actually that's acute inflammation of the larynx. Usually, it's advisable for the person not to perform at all,
right,
because in that state, your vocal cords are very inflamed and fat, so they're going to be very limited in range. And by the end of that night, definitely your voice will probably disappear. If it's something like that, that's due to infection or virus. But if it's the voice has got fatigue because it's been used a long time, or you've got a little bit of a cold on top, or that kind of thing, I think just learning to use the voice differently to make sure that the placement is very forward in the face. You're speaking more forward rather than like having any voice kind of sitting on the throat like that. So where you place your voice is very important, and beyond that, how you project your voice. Again, my method is not to rely on breath support for that, but to rely on kind of what you do with your vocal tract. You can make the sound brighter by just changing things in your vocal tract, as I'm trying to demonstrate now. So that will make the voice carry, as opposed to a voice that sits like this. And if it's a naturally softer voice, they're the kind of elements that brightness I would try to build into the voice, which helps the voice carry but doesn't tire the voice.
Right.